Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I don't normally do this. I'm actually posting this video pretty much right after I posted my last video. I tend to space them out a bit. However, this video is a video response to Infected Flinch. He asked a question and he was very kind to give me a video response on my last question, so I just had to immediately return the favor. And actually, on his answer to my last question, it gave me an idea for another one, but we're getting sidetracked. Anyway, so Infected Flinch asked the question, is it hardware or is it software that makes a console successful? Because Extra Credits did a video about the Vita and how it flopped without any software to support it, despite the fact it's a great piece of hardware. And yeah, I have some interesting contradictory. I mean, when I first saw that Extra Credits video, I just thought, well, yeah, it's obvious. Software is, without software, any console is just going to die. So I was going to just immediately say, yep, software is king. Case closed, no problem. But as I thought more about it, it occurred to me that there are some interesting examples historically that are completely contradictory. In a way, I mean, the Atari 2600, you could argue, there were better consoles like the Intellivision or the ColecoVision, but the 2600 seemed to be the most dominant console of that generation and sold the best, and the games that were on it were the largest number. But maybe because that was the first generation, you know, you could maybe argue, okay, well, people, a mom and dad going into a hardware store, going past the TVs, wouldn't know there was another kind of a console. So maybe not the best example. So then I started thinking about, ironically, Nintendo are, in their collection of hardware that they've made, there are several examples that both prove that software is important and disprove it. And after thinking about it, I don't really know. I'm still sticking to the software is the important thing, but I think it's worth noting, and I'm not sure if anybody else has brought these up yet or not. I'm getting this video out without having checked a lot of other video responses. But anyway, for example, the Game Boy, the original Game Boy had a rotten puke green LCD screen, and it was very bulky and was not the most impressive piece of hardware of that first handheld generation. The Game Gear and the Lynx did color, and they had more buttons, and they were better pieces of hardware. Yet the Game Boy reigned supreme, probably due to the software. Everybody wants to play Mario and Zelda and Metroid. Now, there was also the benefit that because it was so clunky and very low power consumption, the batteries lasted longer on the Game Boy. You could argue, okay, well, that's why it did better than the others. But then look at the Virtual Boy. I mean, that was a 32-bit console with a very powerful processor inside. That was a strong piece of hardware. Yeah, it was maybe, I mean, was it a console? Was it a handheld? Regardless, it was on par with, say, the Super NES. I don't think it could do Mode 7, but it was, you know, a very strong console. Hardly any software for it. 20-odd titles. And that one did have Mario, and I don't think there was a Zelda title, but you know, it had the strength of the Nintendo library behind it, and nobody made any games for it. So the Virtual Boy is like the opposite of the Game Boy in a way, and it proves the point. Software is really what sells and makes a console successful. And then finally there's the Wii, which is a console that both swings the pendulum for the software and against the software argument. When that machine first came out, a lot of people kind of looked at it and thought, it's like two GameCubes duct taped together. I mean, it's not very powerful. It doesn't do high definition. It's not going to stand toe-to-toe with the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. Are you crazy? It ended up being one of the most successful consoles of all time. I mean, second only to the PlayStation 2. Had tons of really great Mario games and Zelda games and Metroid games. I mean, it did everything right. It sold based on its software and what you could do with it. But try telling that to the developers of The Conduit, or Mad World, or No More Heroes. Like, why did some games sell really well and other games on this huge install-based platform didn't sell worth beans? And I think this is going to sound a little odd. This was something I heard on a podcast, so this is not my opinion, but I can kind of, it explained the difference to me. I heard somebody say that video game developers, especially those in Japan, are game development there is of a totally different part of the culture. I mean, those guys are recognized and sort of respected like rock stars are here. You know, hey, you make video games, you're a top-notch industrial leader. And a lot of them agree, and they're like, yeah, I'm a rock star. And they tend to have this feeling that they want their games to shine on whatever console. They want it to look the sexiest, they want it to be the most cutting edge, and are they going to make a Wii version? No, of course not. So that would seem to indicate that no, hardware is more important. It's not the software nor the install base or any of that stuff. If you don't have a console that can provide the experience, I mean, if you're making a Grand Theft Auto game or an Assassin's Creed game or any of these other big open world, Red Dead Redemption, any of that kind of stuff, and you look at the Wii's specs, you're like, we're not making a game like this for that console, even though Assassin's Creed came out on the PSP. But anyway, the Wii was a very strange contradiction to what I was just saying. It was like, it didn't have the specifications, but it was the most successful, except for certain titles, and some developers wouldn't make anything for it because it wasn't strong enough. It didn't have the horsepower under the hood that they wanted. Maybe hardware is more important. It's a very tough question, but I'm gonna lean toward what the extra credits video said, and I'm gonna say software is more important, but there have been examples historically that are the opposite case. So maybe it's somewhere in between. And I think it's going to be interesting as we go forward in a realm where graphics do seem to be dictating a lot of what is being made. You know, there are no AAA developers. You don't get the number of big budget titles that you used to get. And there seems to be this leaning back towards small indie developers, 16-bit looking type of games. And they would argue that it's not the hardware that's selling those games, it's the experience, it's the software. So, yeah. I'm going to stick with software is king. Software makes or breaks a console. But historically, there have been some cases that contradict it. We'll see you down the rabbit hole.